I never thought silence could make a house feel so heavy. The day I realized my family no longer needed me, I was standing in my own kitchen, holding a cup of tea that had already gone cold. The clock on the wall kept ticking, slow, steady, like it was the only thing still doing its job. I remember smiling to myself, not because I was happy, but because crying felt louder than the silence around me. I gave my life to my family, and one day, without anyone saying it out loud, I became a burden. It didn't happen all at once. It never does. People think families break in loud moments, shouting, fighting, doors slamming shut. But sometimes families fall apart quietly, in polite smiles, in soft voices, in pauses where love used to live. If you had asked me years ago who I was, I would have said, I am a mother. Not because I had nothing else, but because being a mother filled every corner of my life, my days, my nights, my prayers, my worries. Everything circled back to my family. I raised my children in a small house at the edge of town. It wasn't fancy, the paint had faded, the floor creaked when you walked too fast, but it was warm, always warm. Not just from the stove in winter, but from laughter, from shared meals, from voices calling out from one room to another. My husband worked long hours. He was a quiet man. He showed love by fixing broken things and bringing home groceries without being asked. When the children were small, he would sit on the floor after dinner, pretending to be tired, letting them climb all over him. I used to watch from the kitchen doorway and think, this is enough. This life is enough. When he passed away, the house changed, not suddenly, just slowly, like a light dimming. The children grew older. They needed me less. That's the way life goes. I know that now. But back then, I held on tightly to routines, because routines were what kept me steady. I woke up early every morning. I cooked, I cleaned, I waited. Waiting became a habit I didn't notice forming. My son was the youngest, the quiet one, the one who used to sit beside me in the evenings while I folded clothes, asking small questions about things that didn't really matter. He had a gentle heart, or at least I believed he did. When he told me he wanted to get married, I smiled. I truly did. What mother doesn't want happiness for her child? I helped with the preparations. I attended every meeting. I stayed up late thinking about guest lists, meals, clothes. People congratulated me. You must be so proud, they said. And I was. On the day of his wedding, the house was full of noise, relatives, laughter, plates clinking, the smell of food everywhere. I moved through the rooms like I always did, making sure everyone was comfortable, fixing small things without being asked, straightening cushions, refilling cups. I watched my son sitting beside his bride. He looked different, not bad, just already somewhere else. I told myself that was normal. After the wedding, the house emptied quickly, too quickly. One moment it was full of people, the next it was quiet again. That night I sat alone at the dining table. There were still flowers on the sideboard, half-burnt candles. I made myself a cup of tea and waited for my son to come and sit with me like he used to. He didn't. I told myself he was tired. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow is a word mothers learn to trust. But tomorrow didn't come the way I expected. After marriage, small things began to change. My son stopped asking what I thought, stopped telling me about his day. He was polite, always polite. But polite is not the same as close. His wife moved into our home, and I tried my best to make her feel welcome. I showed her where everything was. I told her she could arrange things however she liked. I meant it. At first, she smiled and thanked me. Her voice was soft, her words careful. But there was always a distance, like an invisible line neither of us crossed. I started feeling unsure in my own house, unsure of where to sit, when to speak, when to stay quiet. I began asking before doing things I had done freely for years. Is it okay if I make tea now? Do you need the kitchen? They always said yes, but the way they looked at each other afterward made me feel like I had interrupted something important. So I learned to step back. I ate my meals later. I stayed in my room longer. I spoke less. No one told me to do these things. That was what hurt the most. At night, I lay in bed listening to the sounds of the house, their voices, their laughter, the television playing softly in the other room. I felt like a guest in the life I had built. Sometimes I caught myself holding my breath when I walked into shared spaces, as if trying not to disturb the air. One evening, I overheard a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. "She doesn't mean to," my daughter-in-law said quietly. "I know," my son replied, "but things are different now." Different. That word stayed with me all night. I thought about all the years I had given without counting, the nights I stayed awake when my children were sick, the meals cooked, the clothes washed, the worries carried silently. I never thought of it as sacrifice. It was just love. But love, I learned, can become invisible over time. Days passed, then weeks. My son spent more time away. When he came home, he went straight to his room. I stopped waiting for him to ask about my day. Instead, I waited for smaller things, a smile, a pause, a moment. One afternoon, I found myself folding his old clothes, the ones he no longer wore. As I folded them, my hands moved automatically, but my mind went back to when he was a child, running into the house with scraped knees, calling out for me before anyone else. Back then, I wasn't a burden. I was his whole world. The realization came slowly, like rain starting without thunder. I was no longer needed the way I once was, and somehow that made me feel like I was in the way. I tried to talk to my son once, just once. "Is everything okay?" I asked. He smiled. "Of course, Amy, don't worry so much." But his eyes were already looking past me. That night, I cried quietly into my pillow, careful not to make a sound, not because I was afraid, but because I didn't want to be noticed for the wrong reason. I told myself to be strong. I told myself this is what motherhood becomes. You raise them, and then you learn to disappear softly. Still, a part of me hoped that one day he would sit beside me again, hoped that one day he would notice the silence where my voice used to be. I didn't know then that the hardest part was still ahead, and I didn't know that the house I built with love would one day feel like it was asking me to leave. Continue calm pace, do not rush. The day everything changed did not begin with anger. It began like any other day, quiet, ordinary, almost gentle. When they asked me to have my own place, I smiled. Not because I understood, but because crying would have made them uncomfortable. That afternoon, I packed my life into boxes. That night, no one came to check on me. In the morning, I left quietly. As the car pulled away, I didn't feel anger or bitterness. I felt tired of holding on where I was no longer wanted. The new place was small, one room, quiet. For the first time in years, I was completely alone. And slowly, very slowly, I learned something important. That giving your life to your family does not mean losing yourself forever. That being a mother does not end when you are no longer needed. And that silence, as painful as it is, can also become a place where you finally hear yourself again. One evening, I made a cup of tea and sat by the window. The tea was warm this time, and for the first time in a long while, so was my heart. I whispered to myself, I am enough. I always was.